Let's start up. I believe you were a middleweight boxer, but you're considered to be a heavyweight contender in the world of open source. Tell us how you got into that to begin with all those years ago.
Well, it was a very odd story. I had been in the computer rental and leasing business. I was trying to rent Sun Microsystems and Apollo computer Unix workstations. And the engineers who I was talking to about these things were asking me about open source software. This is what, actually back then, of course, it was all free software. It was things like the GNU C and C+ compilers, the X Windows system, the stuff that Richard Stallman, of course, is rightly famous for. And I listened to their story. You know, I'd ask them where this stuff comes from, and they'd all tell me, well, it's from engineers according to their skill to engineers according to their need. And, you know, having studied a little history at university, it sounded a little Marxist to me. So I was a big skeptic of this free software world. But anyway, shortly after I first was introduced, I found myself unemployed. I was launching a little software distribution system, or catalog, and I started adding these, what are now open source products to my catalog. Everything from, you know, O'Reilly's books to, and this is a test of whether you guys actually have been following this, things like Yggdrasil, and Morse telecommunications Slackware products to my catalog. They became my best sellers, and I very quickly learned that there was actually a business in giving away software for free.
How did you see making money out of something that you give away for free?
The whole trick, and this was my background as a salesman. I was trained as a typewriter salesman back in the 70s. You know, going door to door, making people buy my typewriter instead of Olivetti's or whoever else. And what you learn very quickly as a salesman is you'll only be successful if you're actually delivering real value, something your customers really need in a way that your competitors simply aren't solving that need. And what I saw early on in this open source space that, you know, sort of no one else was looking at. Mind you, I was one of the few sales guys who had stumbled into this. Everyone else were, you know, propeller heads and boffins and, you know, guys, long-haired, you know, hippie programming characters, all of whom I love with a passion. But they didn't think in terms of why mainstream customers bought one technology over another. And the reason always is because the technology does something for them that the competing technology doesn't. And what you saw very early on in the open source free software movement is we could do something for our customers that Oracle and IBM and Apple Computer and Microsoft simply were not prepared to do, which was delivering control to the customer. So there was the key benefit, the thing that we could do that our bigger competitors could not. How you make money is, you know, a natural thing in the technology business. Most people don't want to buy technology. They don't even want to use technology. So large corporations, Merrill Lynch, Citibank, anyways, any large organization will not download software for free and build their $100 billion a year business on software where they don't really know where it comes from or who's supporting it. And so we realized, Mark Ewing and I in the very early days, that we had a very real opportunity of making open source and free software more useful for these large corporations and delivering that unique benefit to them.
As you say, Bob, that the majority of your customers then and predominantly now for Red Hat were and are back-end customers, not end users.
That's exactly right. Well, keep in mind, Tim O'Reilly of O'Reilly Books made this point many years ago now. Everyone's sort of fixated on the desktop, sort of being those are the end users. You know, guys like you and me, we go into, you know, whatever your equivalent is over there, CompUSA here, and buy a laptop. And we're personally, as consumers, making decisions on what software goes on that. Tim was making the point that in the 1990s, the killer apps, so in the 1980s, killer apps were things like word processors and spreadsheets. Killer apps being something an application for which you would go and buy a computer in order to run it. In the 90s, late 90s, what Tim recognized was the killer app was not anything on the software store shelf. The killer app was eBay, it was Amazon, it is Google. And so if these killer apps exist on the internet, suddenly the end users don't care what computer they run. They don't choose an operating system because the applications sit out there on the net. Open source, because of its benefit of enabling engineers to connect their computers together over the internet, is a better platform for Google and Amazon and eBay to build their applications on. Our market was not on the end user machine, it was on the server side of the opportunity.
So how did you package the first version of Red Hat to users?
The neat thing about the US economy, it's a wide open, very free market driven economy. To entry. So I was working out of my wife's sewing closet. Marc Ewing was working out of the spare bedroom in their little apartment in North Carolina. And there was nothing stopping us from going to a little a big actually, software replication house in Virginia, paying them, well, we didn't actually pay them, we just ran up a bill on our credit card to put Red Hat Linux on CD, and then we just started hawking it both over the internet and through every software store that would talk to us.
Why the name Red Hat?
Actually, there's a variety of stories. So depending on who you are, I'll give you a different story. Or perhaps I'll let your audience choose which story is the correct one. Just two of them. One is, interesting enough, throughout Western history, red hats have been a symbol of rebellion towards freedom. So Roman slave rebellions, they wore red bandanas to identify each other. In the French Revolution, it was the red cockades of the revolutionaries. And so, of course, we chose the name Red Hat to represent our contribution to this struggle for freedom in the technology industries. That's one version. The next version is Marc Ewing, who is a very smart guy, went to one of the US's top engineering schools, Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, used to wear his grandfather's red lacrosse cap. It looked like a small baseball cap around campus, just because he liked it. But of course, because he was a really smart guy, all of his friends who needed help with their computers, you know, when someone would say, geez, my computer's not working, they'd say, hey, you should talk to my buddy Marc. They'd say, who's Marc? They'd say, he's the guy in the red hat. So Marc Ewing himself, because of his red hat, became symbolized of a standard of engineering or technical support, is another version. And then, of course, there's the really boring one, which is, when you think about it, red and hat are universally recognizable terms, and it makes a great marketing, a very useful marketing tool.
Similarly, the term open source was a marketing-derived term.
Oh, that's exactly right. In English, we have a real problem that most other languages don't suffer. So in French, you have libre, logiciel libre, or software free, free software, meaning free as in the sense of freedom. In French, if you're giving away your software at no cost, it is gratuit. We don't have the same distinction in English. In English, free can be either really cheap, cheesy, useless stuff that you got because the manufacturer didn't want it anymore, or free can be, you know, sort of elections and freedom and empowering the citizens in our democracies. And to call software free when people are used to paying a lot of money for software is conveying exactly the wrong message about it. So we're very supportive of the initiative to clarify that distinction in the English language and use a term that is unequivocal. Everyone knows what open source means.
Some detractors say free as in puppies.
Free as in puppies. Haven't heard that one. Sure, there are a lot of detractors. That's one of the lamest criticisms of open source. I can do a lot better than that if you want to know what the criticism should look like. But the reality to this thing is that it does deliver a benefit that technology users across the planet have needed